Chapter 3 Fear. Memory verse. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. 2 Timothy 1:7. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyways. This is a quote by John Wayne. Here we have our check boxes for attendance and memory verse. Welcome back, brother. So, how was your week? Did you feel like you were more aware of the strategies of the devil? Did you come under fire from the enemy? If you did, then you can be certain that you are now fully on his radar. The great thing about it, though, is that once you are truly engaged in the battle, you are already on the path to victory. Here's a little secret that a lot of Christians forget. Jesus wins. In the book of Revelation, we get an amazing glimpse into the future, where we see Jesus leading his armies, standing triumphantly on the field of battle. There's no half-hour long battle scene like in the movies, where the good guys take a beating, but then come back strong in the end to barely pull out a win. No, our victory will be quick and decisive, and there will be no guessing who will come out on top. Because Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we can enter the fight with confidence. What a glorious promise we have to hold on to. But let's be real with each other. That victory is guaranteed, but it is a victory we may or may not see in our lifetime. In the meantime, we have very real battles to face each and every day. As Oswald Chambers said, we look upon the enemy of our souls as a conquered foe. So he is, but only to God, not to us. God promises us in his word that he will go with us into every battle we fight in his name. But that doesn't change the reality that many times as we step into enemy territory, we get scared. Fear is a part of all of our lives, whether we admit it or not, usually even more so when we enlist into the kingdom army. When we become followers of Christ, God does not take away all our adversity, painful circumstances, or intimidating situations. He does not flip a switch that automatically makes us healthy, wealthy, and wise. No. Instead, more often than not, he calls on us to step out of our comfort zone and face our fears on a daily basis. Like all true heroes of any good epic adventure, we are commanded to stay in the fight until the war is won, no matter how tough it gets. In the first chapter of the book of Joshua, we find one of the greatest leaders of the Old Testament, Moses, dead on top of a mountain overlooking the land of Canaan. We also find his assistant Joshua, now put in charge of literally millions of refugees, preparing to invade an entire region with the intent of driving out all of its inhabitants and setting up shop there permanently. God gives Joshua his marching orders, and then in verses 6 and 7, he gives this command: Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give to them. Be strong and very courageous. God could have very easily wiped out all of the residents of the Promised Land without even breaking a sweat. He could have made everything nice and easy for his people. They had just endured 400 years of slavery in Egypt and a brutal march through the desert. The least he could do was give them a place to hang their hats, right? But God wasn't simply going to hand over the Promised Land to the Hebrews. They would have to overcome their fears and fight for what they were promised. King Solomon, before he became the wisest man to ever rule the nation of Israel, first had to overcome his own fears. As his father, King David, was lying on his deathbed, he handed over the throne and all of its responsibilities to young Solomon. In 1 Chronicles chapter 22, verses 12 through 13, King David gives him the very same command the Lord gave to Joshua. May the Lord give you discretion and understanding when he puts you in command over Israel, so that you may keep the law of the Lord of your God. Then you will have success if you are careful to observe the decrees and laws that the Lord gave Moses for Israel. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Even Jesus had to overcome fears while he was here on this earth. Yes, Jesus was fearful. Don't sugarcoat the fact that although Jesus was God in the flesh, he was also fully human. In the last chapter, we talked about Jesus being on his knees in prayer at the Garden of Gethsemane, pleading with his Father to take this cup away from him. What is this cup? It is the painful agony of torture and a slow death upon the cross. But even more so, it was the separation from his dad that he knew was coming, as he took all of the punishment for our sins upon his shoulders. But, like a true warrior, he got up from the garden and stood firmly to face his fears. And when the Roman soldiers came to arrest him, and Peter tried to defend Jesus by hacking off the ear of one of the soldiers with his sword, Jesus told him this. "Put away your sword," Jesus told him. "Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would these scriptures be fulfilled that described what must happen now?" Mark chapter 26, verses 52 through 54. That is how you face your fears. Pray about it. Give it over to God. Then stand up and do what you are called to do. Unfortunately, though, there is a flip side that all of us know too well. There will be days when your fears will overcome your courage and you stumble in your walk. Peter, the rock of the early church, just hours after he stood bravely before the squad of soldiers in the garden, crumbled under the pressure. After Jesus was taken captive, hauled off under the cloak of darkness to stand trial before the high priest, Peter was forced to confront his fears when the people accused him of being one of Jesus' disciples. And just like it happened to many of us, Peter fell victim to his fears. He did the very thing he said he would never do: deny his friend and mentor in his hour of greatest need. Matthew 26, verses 69 through 75, gives us the heart-wrenching account. Now, Peter was sitting in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again, with an oath. "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them, for your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses on himself and swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. We all have fears. Sometimes we overcome them, sometimes they overcome us. But as long as we are in these earthly bodies, we will have to face them in order to grow, no matter what area of life we are talking about. As C.S. Lewis said, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at its testing point." Fill out the evolution on the next page and begin to face those fears. Evolution 1. Face your fears. So what are the fears you're facing in your life now? Are you afraid of failing as the spiritual leader of your home? Are you afraid of leaving the security of your current job to go do what God has called and gifted you to do? Are you afraid God might call you to stay in your current job? Are you afraid to commit to someone because you've been burned before? Are you afraid of what it might mean to really sell out for Christ? What is it that paralyzes you? Write it down and be bold enough to share it with your platoon. Don't cop out on this one with some generic answer. You know what you're really afraid of. Be honest with your brothers. If you've got a leader that's paying attention, he's going to call you out on it anyways. So just get it out there. So here's where we get down to it. As a follower of Christ, you are called to lay down your life for his cause. Jesus himself tells us this in Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 25, that if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. Think about it. Isn't pretty much all fear ultimately rooted in selfishness? Aren't we afraid of what might happen to us? What people might say or think about us? What we might have to give up? And here we have Jesus telling us that if we truly want to be his followers, we must turn from those selfish ways. He doesn't give us an option. He doesn't water anything down for us. You either trust him and follow where he leads, or you hang on to your fears and you watch from the side of the road as he walks on by. The first step in letting go is to identify those fears. The second step is to figure out what you're going to do about them. Evolution 2. Do something about it. So what is one thing you will do this week to face your fears head on? Be specific. Write it down. And tell your platoon so they can help lift you up in your prayer and accountability this week. Don't put this off till some later date where it will be more convenient for you. Face your fears now, or they will continue to haunt you till you do. The final evolution for this chapter is to answer the two questions below. Take the time to really think about your answer. Play it out in your mind in both directions. Then you choose which road you think is best. Evolution 3. What if? Do you truly believe it is possible to live a life free from fear? Why or why not? Be honest in your answer. Don't just give in to the churchy response. What would your life look like if you could say with complete certainty, I have no fear of anything that could happen to me or my family, because I know without a doubt that God is in control? Step out into boldness this week, brothers. You cannot discover your purpose until you overcome your fears. Next steps, reality check. It's pretty important that we stop and take a moment to do a reality check here. Not all of us can be the fearless warrior every moment of every day. There are going to be times in your life where no matter how awesome things are going for you, some circumstance jumps out of nowhere and blindsides you, and you get seized up by fear. The enemy we fight against loves to capitalize on those moments by heaping on tons of guilt or shame or frustration upon our hearts. And so often those feelings just send us in a downward spiral back to our old sinful ways. We have to realize and accept this. Jesus knows we are going to be afraid. He knows that sometimes we're going to let those fears get the best of us. He knows, yet he loves us just the same. And again, what's so awesome about his word is that he clearly shows us where his heart is on this issue. Back to the story of Peter getting grilled by a couple of servant girls and experiencing a massive fail in his relationship with Jesus. No doubt that Peter was consumed by guilt and shame in the days after Jesus' death. Maybe that's why he went back to where Jesus found him in the first place, out on a fishing boat. Maybe he just couldn't see himself as worthy of any kind of ministry after letting Jesus down, so he just went back to where he was comfortable. And then Jesus comes back. And instead of shaking his head at Peter and saying, "Brother, I told you were going to drop the ball," he gently and lovingly restores Peter back to where he wanted him to be. 3 times Peter denied his Savior, and 3 times Jesus gives Peter the opportunity to reaffirm his love for his friend. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus had asked him the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were young, you were able to do as you like. You dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will dress you and take you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to let him know by what kind of death he would glorify God. And then Jesus told him, follow me. John chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. Jesus calls us to lay aside our fears and follow boldly his commands. But when we fail, he is there to pick us up and cover us in his limitless grace. Not only can we find rest in that truth, but the Bible actually tells us to boast in our weaknesses. Check out 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. As followers of Christ, we will boast about our weaknesses, because it is through them that Jesus will show us his strength. We all have fears. We are all scared to fully step out into faith. Embrace those fears and let the power of Jesus Christ shine through your weaknesses as you charge head first into battle for the glory of his name. Those who fear the Lord do not fear bad news. They confidently trust the Lord to take care of them. They are confident and fearless and can face their foes triumphantly. Psalms 112, verses 7 through 8. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. This is a quote from Nelson Mandela. Here we have our mission objectives. Don't forget your memory verse. Be bold as you face your fears, and don't try to face them alone. Enlist the support of your brothers. That is what they are here for. Asking Jesus to help you get past your fears would be a great thing to fast about this week. Again, how bad do you want it? Here we have prayer request. Please write down the prayer request for all of the members of your platoon this week, and be diligent about lifting them up throughout the week. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7.